What an ugly way to start a presentation of a famous statue in Berlin. Art defaced by Greenpeace, protesting about air pollution. Air pollution? What does that have to do with art or design? Air pollution, that's part of urban living, isn't it? I'm a designer. I'm in love with art. I'm addicted to it. I can't stop looking at it. But you know what? I'm not the only person here that is somehow in love with art. Even if people don't know they're in love with art or know how to acknowledge it, that love of art is embedded within us. The purpose of this presentation may be to talk about design. Let's not overlook that everyone is a designer. Everyone has design inputs to make. In my case, as a designer, I'm also an educator. Even more specifically, I'm a futurist and an urbanist, which goes some of the way to explaining this little toy here. I'm absolutely fascinated by urban design because it's what we are living. Urbanism is important to us because urbanism is something we are beginning to live today. As a subset of how we live in cities, we are going to look at aspects of the urban future and urban mobility without the automobile. Without the automobile as we know it, an urban future without many of the old-style bicycles and a few other lifestyle changes. One of the unavoidable facts of our cities as they continue to grow vertically, extreme high-density living is a part of our future. So we will talk about trends emerging for cities and connect a few dots for the near future. These predictions are based on how a contemporary designer thinks, principally because it is designers are those thinking about the end user, people, not making decisions just based on technology. Cities of the future should be about people. Cities should be for people, not for cars, not for car parks, not for pollution, and not for the individual profit of a minority of speculators or business individuals. Designers, whether they are architects or industrial designers, are today engaged with people, making aesthetic and value judgments for and with people, instead of decisions just based on engineering and technologies. So let me show you what can be done with dots. Let's start by adding a people dot, all by itself up there. For too long, in recent decades, design and aesthetics have been uncomfortable and/or unnecessary considerations for a lot of engineers. I think that's cruel or unjust, because everyone is attracted to art and design, consciously or not. People want to see and feel something that looks good. You, people in this audience and in our city, should be involved with the designing and planning, because everyone is a designer at some point. Now let's add a designer dot. Successful design is not just about engineering or technology. When TEDxDEU talks about the technological viability, that is the domain of engineers. The desirable part of product design is the exclusive domain of designers. When cities were built over recent decades, building engineers and entrepreneurs ruled many of those decisions, placing commercial considerations above everything, resulting in some stark examples of very ugly cities. Attractive design or aesthetics were a secondary consideration. The unfortunate part about such an approach is that various factors have drawn humankind into these extreme, high-density, ugly urban centers. Happiness is in short supply. With a lack of satisfaction in life, social interaction can be less than charming between citizens. Streets full of planning without people, and speculators or builders' greed. And people are expected to be happy or understand any meaning of beauty in this environment. Let's not even talk about social housing. Now, sociologists and architects started to make observations and then claims about urban living. This guy, Christian de Portzamparc, whom you've probably never heard of, is a Pritzker Prize winner, said recently, even though people are not happy in their crowded neighborhoods and claustrophobic apartments, no one else but an architect could solve the problems of a contemporary city. The way de Portzamparc handles space can be seen when looking at the Luxembourg Philharmonic. He could have been a good designer, but let's give him an architect dot. Similar conclusions were shared by another architect, Renzo Piano. He did the Shard in London, who commented recently, buildings eventually affects all our lives, acting as a container for the unfolding history. Another urbanist, Megan Fowler, said in the middle of last year, all designers these days agree that cities are at their best when they are walkable, designed for people instead of cars. This walkability thing has been around us for a surprisingly long time. It's a successful transit system developed since medieval times or earlier. Walkability was a necessity for enabling people to meet, greet, talk, and to engage in commerce. When cars ran people off the streets in these European cities, it has resulted in a serious decline in population density and commerce today. So this is the vision some people are having of London in the future. Yes, that's the Shard in the background. In London, plans are underway today, at this minute, to reduce cars from the city. Streets, with the Shard there in the background, to make London a livable, walkable cities. To my way of thinking, that means a dot for walkable cities. Both Piano and de Portzamparc talk about designing space. De Portzamparc said, I understood that the idea of space is crucial in the new world where the street has vanished and cars are everywhere and people feel lost. Feeling lost in a city? Time for another feeling lost dot, because it's something to overcome in future cities, that sense of alienation. Renzo Piano addresses the same sense of alienation, claiming the essence of architecture in terms of discovery, light, space, compression, and a sense of lightness. For our future cities, a feeling of space and lightness leading to a discovery dot for the future. It has become important for us to build open spaces, like this example. Open spaces leads us to a renaissance in urban living, a renewal or revitalization. Today we are witnessing that renaissance of design over engineering. So important that it requires a dot for open spaces. Yet our lust for physical beauty remains. Our demands for ethereal stimulation remains. We have lived amongst beauty for centuries. We have lived amongst beauty for centuries, and the human soul will not ignore. So our living spaces should reflect this too. So I'm going to give living spaces another dot. To revitalize cities, There is a return to design, a rebirth to attractive design, to introduce some form of art back into the street and to invest in open space for the inhabitants of cities. This is one of the dots of the future, revitalizing cities. In other words, design is undergoing some form of renaissance, which in itself, renaissance, is profoundly important because Florence and the Renaissance artists were one of the epicenters of Western art, which is still reflected to this minute in current work. Artists of the Renaissance brought perspective into images they were painting, but particularly exposed the human form in a way never captured by artists before. There was an explosion of art and the human body, probably best represented by Michelangelo's memorable David. The citizens of Florence and others in Tuscany were surrounded by art for centuries. Botticelli, for example. The curves of the human form may have been first exposed in the Renaissance era, but when we look at Italian industry today, curves like that still inhabit Italian design. One only has to look at the Milan fashion industry or the automotive industry of the Tuscany region to see reflection of that innate sense of curve and form. These undeniably beautiful cars are designed in the physical heartland of Renaissance Italy. It can't be a coincidence, the connection between Renaissance art and the design scene today. Renaissance deserves a dot in future cities. We are seeing a renaissance in urban design with art and space. That connection similarly exists in France with Monet and the car marque Citroën and many other European nations. Great painters influenced all of those automobile-producing countries. These countries that did produce stunning art tended to design the great car marques. The reason I'm talking about cars so much with my bicycle is that of urban mobility. Cars have been with us for a good part of our lives, but the urban future I'm talking about is not likely to include cars as we know them today. You might have already seen the suggestions for the immediate future. So that calls for another dot connecting to the urban future. No cars as we know them. But there is something else behind our living requirements. Trees, nature. We are seeing a renaissance in cities that includes what is called urban forests. Despite migration from farms and forests, we humans generally remain fascinated by greenery. Cities today are soaked in pollution, filthy to look at, filthy to breathe. People see the primary cause of pollution as being cars. When cars are crowding the sidewalk, when car drivers are caught in traffic jams on a daily basis, people dream of trees. You think I'm kidding about trees? In Singapore, which is certainly near the top of extreme urban density, not only are they building vertical forests, they're even building artificial trees since 2014. Sufficient research has also been carried out to show that removing cars from cities will go a long way to removing a lot of air pollution. Removing cars from sidewalks has human benefits as well. That certainly deserves another dot connecting to the urban future. Trees. And if you think I'm dreaming, Look at the vertical or urban forests that are being built now across Europe. In Holland, for example, under construction at this very minute. In France, atriums in buildings that are being proposed. And in Asia, trees at 33 stories in height. And the new Amazon dome with enclosed rainforests. Or the architect Stefano Boeri's first vertical forest, completed in Milan. Yeah, Milan, that's part of Tuscany again. Or his latest work in China. I did that too fast. Or his latest work in China. Talking of a reduction in air pollution, he states that cities have the opportunity to be an integral part of their own solution by increasing the number of trees and forests. The GEL City Planning Institute in Copenhagen, Denmark, published late last year guidelines on urban planning with the adage that people should be at the center. That's Copenhagen. Could there be a link in the Denmark, could there be a link to Denmark having some of the happiest citizens in the world? Or is it only about Scandinavian consensus democracy? The point of all of this is that design and living in some form of happiness is inextricably linked. If we accept that humans have this feeling about happiness, art, design, with or without being able to define it clearly, that spells out that humans should be involved in design. Therefore, for an urban future, we need an involved dot. Now, in this new urban setting, what are the mega trends that designers are working on? Well, trend one, human-powered vehicles, a hybrid combination of pedal power and small electric motors. These vehicles are in existence today. That needs an HPV dot. Trend two, self-health care and reversing obesity. Recent serious scientific studies show there's a big link to good health and more cycling. That needs a dot, doesn't it, for self-health care? And then trend number three is hydroponics, growing food that we can eat inside buildings. That also needs another dot. Now, we've got a lot of dots there, so I'll just add a couple more. Human-centered design is a mega trend in itself. The trends discussed here and the subsequent reduction of cars in cities, less pollution and so on, there will be significant developments based on hybrid human-powered vehicles, which in turn leads to measurable health benefits. Human-powered vehicles also answers that human need for freedom, for happiness, and markedly less pollution. In the future cities, freedom deserves a dot. When designers create something attractive and functional, we are likely to enjoy it. Christian Deportes-en-Parc said, "I believe that the best projects are about inventing or reinventing confidence in the future." Another dot. Customers are people too. And finally, customers are what drives commerce, it's what pays the bills. One way or another, all important customer dot. Connecting the design dots, there they all are. How do we connect all of those dots? When overwhelming evidence connects art to design and beauty, how do all these dots connect with each other in a future city? An engineer may connect the dots in one way. Management may use a more layered approach, which is great for their bureaucracy. A designer, though, will connect the dots we've just talked about, the future of urban living, and in something a little more innovative. A designer will seek to create an object that both serves a purpose and is attractive to the users. So what of the future? Well, I'm going to stand by the claim that the future cities have a chance to be a lot happier, a lot greener, and a lot more egalitarian, and a lot less polluted, because designers of that future are engaged with people. So far, it is the designers and the architects, not the engineers and the technologists. The designers and architects that have demonstrated the greatest fascination with how people interact with space. As a designer, what is my contribution to the urban future? Beyond education, I'm working with hybrid solution for urban mobility projects because I can. In case it wasn't obvious, these are examples referred to in lightweight vehicles, hybrid, human-powered. A last word on Renaissance art. Westphalia and Nissan have just released their latest camper van. And guess what they are calling it? Anybody want to guess? No less than Michelangelo. And you want to tell me there's no connection between Renaissance art and cars? There is. You should scroll a bit more. There we go. Michelangelo and Da Vinci, in their time, they said, I can, because they could. Today, I can design lightweight vehicles for the future. Thank you very much.